All right, guys, we're back now for the second and maybe three parts of this video. It just depends on how much I can quit rambling. I don't know how I forgot it, but I forgot my favorite line in this play, which comes in right before the player and all of these guys come back in. So it may be that it wasn't in your text. Let's see. Nope, there it is. Okay, so while they're doing the coin flipping thing, let's back up a little bit. We're going to be at the very bottom of, I believe it's page 28 for you guys. So really awesome line. So before it's to set it up, no, we don't need to set it up. Let's read it. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they're flipping coins, and they say this. They say, "We cross our bridges." This is Guildenstern, by the way, of course. "We cross our bridges when we come to them and burn them behind us, with nothing to show for our progress except a memory of the smell of smoke and a presumption that wants our eyes watered." Now, I would love to spend a lot of time discussing this quote. Problem is that one of your questions is to discuss this quote. So I'd like you to think about it. But he's really mixing a bunch of metaphors we have and talking about them. And but also there's so much power in this. If you look around my classroom, this one of my former students did this in a little like an art piece for me. She did this like really cool design with all the letters of the words and stuff to mean something different. And it's hanging up on the wall there because I love when we taught this in class. I spent probably an entire class period talking about this. The idea of we cross these bridges. This is a phrase we use sometimes. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Because we cross them, but then we light them on fire on the way out, and then we forget about the whole thing. And there's a lot more to it, obviously, but I want you to think about it and write about it in your questions. But my favorite line in the book is that. And I may already say that this is a great line, or I really think this might be my favorite line. It's not. It's this one. This is one of my favorite lines in literature. My favorite by far is the ending of Great Gatsby, but this is right up there, probably in my top three. It's on my Mount Rushmore for sure. I love the way it's written, and it says so much about us as people. So I forgot it. It was at the tail end of yesterday. Of the last video would have been a great way to stop that video, but I guess it's just a great way to start this one. Now, after this, we get into page 29 where the player and his troop come back in. All right, and we get some more interaction with them. Remember, this is always a commentary on life in general. These guys are. The players represent that, and really Stoppard's commenting on how we're all actors in a lot of ways. We play different roles in our own lives. We rarely are honest about who we are. We're typically putting on an act for various things. We do whatever we fit whatever role we think we're needed for that instance. I'm a father right now, so this is how I have to be. But I'm a teacher over here, so I have to act differently there. I remember before we went on quarantine, speaking of actors, one of the big things we got a speech about was how we had to dress if we did videos, So it's like, I'm wearing pajama pants right now, and I'm wearing a nice shirt button up above it. And it's like, I have to be a teacher here. Heaven forbid I'm wearing a T-shirt, because then y'all would have no respect for me. So let me put on an act like I actually got up and took this seriously, as far as got dressed up completely. I didn't. I do take it seriously, but honestly, if I could sit here and do this in a T-shirt, I would. But I have to put on the act that I'm an actual teacher here for a second. So, and trust me, people doing video conferencing all over the country are doing the same thing. I promise you. So that's what we have to be aware of anytime these guys are on stage. So as we go through and get into a couple of, let's look down on page 30. There's a couple of really cool lines. The player is having a big existential crisis throughout this whole play. He's really struggling with who he is and the loss of what he thought was his job. He talks about how they used to be actual actors and actresses doing these really formal things. Now they're forced to do all of this stuff that just isn't in their character, but they have to do what the people want, which again, we can say that's us in life. All right. At one point, there's a conversation. It's a back and forth here. We have a bunch of those talking about taking of people's voices. The part where Guildenstern says, "You'd be lost for words." Rosencrantz says, "You'd be tongue-tied, like a mute in a monologue, like a nightingale at a Roman feast." Blah blah blah. They're talking there about your voice being taken, your one job being removed. I mean, a monologue is you standing on stage reciting this long speech, and if you're a mute in that, you serve no purpose. Okay. So then the player, he bursts out, says, "We can't look each other in the face. You don't understand the humiliation of it." And this is the line: "To be tricked out of the single assumption which makes our existence viable, that somebody is watching." Just the whole purpose of their existence as actors and actresses is there needs to be an audience. There should be someone watching. And again, we apply that to life. And this is one of the things that the absurdists really tackled was if you found out that there wasn't a bigger picture, if you heaven forbid, and they were questioning this, and questioning it doesn't make it wrong, okay? But they're questioning the assumption of what if there wasn't a God? How do we go on? Because there's no big picture then. And I agree with that. I mean, it's one of those things that makes being a believer, makes life have meaning to it. And they're like, well, we were tricked out of that for them. They're like, what if that was the case? Sorry, I got something on my screen. It's like, what if we lost that? And it just makes him come down to a meltdown. And then I love the next section here, still on page 30 for you guys. It's this player that has lost in parentheses. He says, there's a lot that he says, but the line I want to look at near the end says, we're actors. We're the opposite of people. And think about that for a second. Again, it goes on two levels. Like literally, he says, we're not the roles we're playing aren't who we are. They're not people. They're creations. But then us in our lives on a day-to-day basis, so much of that is the same. We all put on different roles. You're a certain person when you're with your friends, but you don't act that way at other times. You may even act like you enjoy or about things that you really aren't, but you feel like you have to do that to fit in with the group you're with. Man, I find that happening in my life constantly. Depending on the situation I'm in, I have to completely alter my personality to fit it. It's one of the things I hate about, life in general. And I try not to, because any of you that have spent time with me outside of class know that I'm not one of those teachers that is one way in class and one way out. I'm the same at all times. That can be a positive or a negative. But the person I am in class is the person who I am outside of class. Now, does that mean like if, when my wife takes me to a fancy Christmas dinner with the doctor she works with, do I have to alter who I am? Well, a little bit. I mean, I can't wear the stuff I'd like to wear. I'm a lot more of a casual person. I can't put on my heavy metal vest that I like to wear that's got all my funny sayings and punk rock stuff on. I can't wear that to the dinner because that would be inappropriate. So I have to, probably talk about a little bit of different stuff. And I have to play along with some of their politics and stuff because I don't want to cause a fight because I don't agree with everything they say. So we do have to alter who we are at times. And the player's struggling with that. And you know what? We all do at times in our life. Trust me, I've had this crisis. Multiple times. So it's kind of a neat description. But the funny thing here is that Guildenstern's kind of in on this. Rosencrantz is still doing something else completely. He's just not paying attention. Rosencrantz is such a humorous figure in this. He really is. Going on, Rosencrantz has very quick little one-line things. He says, you never, it's a lie. And he catches himself with a giggle in a vacuum and sits down. So in other words, no one's paying attention. He's just being an idiot. Then the player has yet another really large speech here at the bottom of page 30. And then the first few lines of this one are key. We pledge our identity, secure in the conventions of our trade that someone would be watching, and then gradually no one was. So again, he's talking about life. When we're younger, you've got that audience, your parents, your teachers, things like that. But then you become an adult and you lose some of that guidance. It becomes much more difficult. See, as you're getting ready to move into the next stage of your life, and we as adults keep telling you about how hard it is, we don't do a great job of explaining it because it's not that the work level in college gets harder. And it's not that the day-to-day life, because I'm sure a lot of you look at your parents and you're like, they go to work, they come home, and that's it. I mean, I could do that for 40 years. I have to deal with, some of you deal with work, and you deal with school, and you deal with having to juggle all this other stuff, and you feel like life is so much harder. And in some ways it is for you, I'll admit. But the point is that you at least have this direction. That's the thing I think that a lot of you are going to miss the most about the consistency of high school as you go to college, is you're going to not have that direction. You're not going to have someone telling you, hey, look, this is what you've got to do. You'll have an advisor who's going to sign paperwork based on just because they have to. Unless you're really lucky, most of your advisors are going to be a waste of your time. And you're going to kind of have to navigate this with some help from your parents, but once again, you still have to navigate it yourself. Life is about to get more complicated, and it's about to seem to have a lot less structure for some of you, and it's going to have a lot less direction. And that's where a lot of us struggle, and that's going to be something that comes up consistently through the rest of this act, is the importance of guidance and what happens when we lose it. Okay, so we've got a lot of back and forth here that comes up. As you can tell by my book, we've got some really important one-liners coming up, though. The player makes a comment. We go on for if you can look at yours, I can't, I don't know how to screencast yet. I should learn. But we've got a lot of really short lines here. Trying to find where it is. There's a part where the player tells them I should concentrate on not losing your heads. I apologize for the dead air here, guys. Oh, here it is. It's going to be on 31. Bottom of 31, he's talking to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. It's another reference to them dying. And there's several comments about them being beheaded. It happens a lot in this play. The player says, I would concentrate on not losing your heads. Some dramatic irony because we know they are going to, in fact, do that. And then he has a great line at the top of 32, which is another one of the ones in here that I really love. He says, we have been left so much to our own devices. After a while, one welcomes the uncertainty of being left to other people's. And that's what I was just talking about guidance. So much of your life has been about this, you're in 11th grade, so the next thing is 12th grade, and you're going to take these classes. We let you sign up for classes and electives and stuff, but as well as I do at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you put down there. You got limited choices, and that's sometimes a blessing. But he says, eventually that changes, and it feels like so much you're left to your own devices that you're responsible for your life and the choices you make, and you have to make them. You might have advice from people, but at the end of the day, guys, you're getting to the point now where your parents can't make your decisions for you. Some of them are going to keep trying, but eventually you have to do it yourself. My mother's not happy about a lot of the decisions I make in my life. She wasn't super on board with me getting married when I did. She loves Mitzi now. She definitely doesn't agree with how I raised my children. She wanted me to go work at Mobile Christian. The second or third year I was at our school, Mobile Christian tried to hire me away, and she was so upset when I wouldn't even take the interview. So she doesn't agree with everything I do, but the fact is that I go to her for advice, and then I do what I want. But the player's pointing out that there comes times in our lives where we just want someone else to tell us what to do. And that's kind of how a lot of us feel right now as adults. You're in a situation where there's so much uncertainty, and we just want someone to say, do this next. And there's some peace in that. So a lot of us, why we're jealous of you guys up to the point you're at now, was because, I look at my sixth grader and I'm like, why are you acting like life's so tough? You get up, you have a list of things you have to do. You do those, then you can play and do whatever you want. There's no responsibility. If I could take what I know now and go back to being a sixth grader, it would be great. I would knock out everything I need to do in the first 2 hours I was awake during this, being this distance learning. I would knock those things out, and then I would have summer early. But when we have those directions, we complain because we feel like people are trying to boss us around and tell us what to do, and we gripe about it, and we want more freedom. And then when we get more freedom, we don't really want it. And that's kind of what the player's commenting on here. He says uncertainty is the normal. So by the way, Guildenstern said that, not the player. I apologize. The player says uncertainty is the normal state. It's like, that's the way life is. That's our default state, is we don't know what's going to happen because you can't. We're not fortune tellers. And even if we were, we would be hacks. There's no way to do that. You don't know what's coming down the road. The player says, relax, respond. We're still on page 32 for you, by the way. Relax, respond. That's what people do. You can't go through life questioning your situation at every turn. And he's trying to give advice here that, you can't just constantly think, you can't constantly question every little thing. You'll go crazy doing that. But Guildenstern's response is, but we don't know what's going on or what to do with ourselves. We don't know how to act. Look at the double meaning there. Okay, we don't know how to act. We don't know. Literally, that means we don't know what we're supposed to do because we haven't questioned things. That points to the actor too. We don't know which mask to put on in some instances, is what he's saying. We don't know what role we're playing at that point and how we should behave. The player says, act natural. You know why you're here, at least. And the player says, you don't have to worry about it. Just be yourself. He says, you know why you're here, at least. And the irony of that is, do they? Do we? My 10th graders just got done taking a test over the book Tuesdays with Maury, and we're supposed to be writing about legacy, kind of like what you guys did. Of course, theirs was just a test question. It's about what legacy they wanted to leave. And I told them they couldn't say. I wanted to live a good life and be a good, spouse and father or mother and be serve God. I said, you can't write that because that's not specific enough. I want you to think more. And that's one of the things they're pointing at here is, we all act like we know why, God put me here for a reason. And what was it? And that's where we struggle, because a lot of us haven't asked enough questions and thought enough and developed enough to understand, to start getting a picture of why we're here. And if you don't have that, man, it's tough. It gets tougher the older you get, in fact. It's really difficult for me right now. Of course, I kind of feel like I know why God put me here and what my purpose is. My issue is deciding if I've accomplished it or not. And goodness, the scary part is if I have, what then? So, of course, I know I haven't, so I'm not worried about that yet. He says, you know why you're here, at least in Guildenstern says, we only know what we're told, and that's little enough. And for all we know, it isn't even true. Another line that I absolutely love, that so many times people skip over. The player just told him, he says, you know why you're here, at least in Guildenstern says, I really don't. He says, I only know what I'm told, which is very little. Okay. I'm not told much. And even when I'm told, I don't know if it's true. And that's the key with life. You've got people that give you guidance all the time, but how much of it is true? Maybe it's true for them. It doesn't mean it's true for you. And how much guidance do you really get that's really good? A lot of times people just give you these vague platitudes and like, oh, you'll be fine, I'll pray for you, and they leave it at that. And you don't really, when you're done with the conversation, you really don't feel like you've gotten any further with what you need. The player says, for all anyone knows, nothing is. Everything has to be taken on trust. Truth is only that which is to be taken as true. It's the currency of living. There may be nothing behind it, but it doesn't make any difference so long as it's honored. One acts on assumptions. What do you assume? And guys, right there, you could take and put it on your mirror and look at it every day. How much of our life is taking people on trust over things we assume? And we do this. A real simple, and I'm overly simplifying this, is we make some assumptions about types of people immediately, and we base our truths around that. Political things, all Republicans do blank, all Democrats do blank, and we make those assumptions, and that's how we design our truth around those things, and that's stupid. I'm sorry, that's just not correct. But the player says we have to do that because we can't question every little thing. And if you treat each person as an individual, he said, you run into it's a heavy burden. It really is. It's so much easier. It's a shortcut. Stereotypes are a shortcut. It allows us to look at the world and have it make sense in our own mind by saying all people do blank, all these people do blank, and we shouldn't, to be honest with you. All right. Okay, we got to get moving. Let me find a good place to keep moving. You want to keep going through that. There's still, of course, obviously you want to read it. We talk some more about the coin thing. The coin thing is such a continuing motif for this. All right, here we go with the next big part. Let me find it for you. It's going to be when they start talking about death. All right, page 34. 34 for you guys. Let me see, how far am I going again today? All right, yeah, we're probably going to have to take a break again here in a second. Let's get through the death conversation, then we'll stop, and then I'll close up the last little part. All right, and we're not going to talk a lot about this, okay, but I do want to hit a couple of high levels. Rosencrantz at one point says, do you ever think of yourself as actually dead, lying in a box with a lid on it? And for you guys, again, this is page 34. Really kind of an odd moment for Rosencrantz, who never asks serious questions, but he says, do you ever think about yourself literally lying in a box dead? And Guildenstern, very odd for him, just says no. It's really neat because if you look at this, all of a sudden we talk about these two characters aren't interchangeable, but at this point they kind of seem to be, because Guildenstern has switched to the very short, basic responses, and Rosencrantz has now got these long, meandering passages. So it's kind of cool to see that show up. Guildenstern just says no. He doesn't think about that. No, normally we'd expect a big diatribe here, but we don't get one. Says, nor do I really. This is Rosencrantz. It's silly to be depressed by it. I mean, one thinks of it like being alive in a box. One keeps forgetting to take into account the fact that one is dead, which should make all the difference, shouldn't it? I mean, you'd never know you were in a box, would you? It would just be like asleep in a box. Not that I'd like to sleep in a box, mind you, not without any air. You'd wake up dead for a start, and then where would you be apart from inside a box? That's the bit I don't like, frankly. That's why I don't think of it. Now, okay, so that is Rosencrantz. Wandering and saying a bunch of nonsense. But, the nonsense, if you read through it, there's a little more depth to it. And he continues on. He talks about life in a box, and this is the key line we want to talk about. Life in a box is better than no life at all, is the point he makes. And again, that's going to be for you on page 35, I believe. Or the end of 34, 35. He points out, life in a box is better than no life at all. And the thing is that I ask you about this on your questions. So if you're watching this video and you've made it all the way to this part, then maybe this will help you. If not, you probably didn't need my help with this anyway. But here's the thing. He's like, life in a box is better than no life at all. In other words, life with very confined parameters is better than no life at all. is his point. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I want to point out that Mr. Morris doesn't. All right. We've had this conversation with people before that a lot of us believe that the ultimate worst thing that can happen to you is death. And I'm in strong disagreement with that. I would much rather be dead than suffering as alive. If someone could tell me you can have the next 20 years, but you're going to be broke, you're going to be homeless, you're going to be, a drug addict, you're going to be mistreated by everyone who comes across you, you're going to be constantly beaten up and robbed, but hey, at least you're alive. No, thank you. I'm not saying I'm gonna go off and kill myself. I'm saying if I had an option, if God came down from heaven and said, here's your option, 20 more years of this, or, I take you right now, I'm going to go ahead and very quickly say I'm done. All right. So Rosencrantz is, again, one of the simple minded who believes that, hey, at least you're still alive, even if you're living like he's talking about literally in a box. Who would want that? Who would want that? And it's easy for us to look at that on a literal level and say, who would want to be living in a box? But the fact is, most of us live in a box, okay? You're boxed in with this is your role. This is what you have to do, and you can't do anything else. And if you want to, too bad. I'm a teacher. Teachers have certain things we have to do, and that to fit the role of a teacher, you have to have. I don't like a lot of it. I don't follow a lot of it. A lot of the ways we're supposed to have relationships, the way we're supposed to have relationships with our students, it's supposed to be a very professional relationship where, I walk in the room and I'm the authority in the room and I'm not going to take any of your nonsense. And if a student emails me and says, hey, Mr. Morris, I'm struggling with this, I have to keep this distance. I don't do that. Now, I don't cross over into where it's inappropriate. I'm not going to go hang out with, a 10th grader who says, hey, Mr. Morris, we're going to the movies. You want to come with us? No, I'm not going to do that. But, if I'm playing a video game and some kid, is like, hey, Mr. Morris, do you want to come play such and such with us? I might do that. Well, you're a teacher. You're not supposed to do that. That cheapens the respect they have for you. Well, first of all, I don't agree. Second of all, if it does, I don't feel like that's my total goal. So if I was forced to be a teacher but have to exist inside that box of what a teacher does, I wouldn't want to do it. All right. They keep talking. We're still a little bit more about the death thing. Rosencrantz says, eternity is a terrible thought, though. I mean, when's it going to end? Which, a little bit of irony. Obviously, it doesn't. And then he also says, they don't care. We count for nothing. We could remain silent until we're green in the face. They wouldn't come. Again, there's a little bit of a question about religion in that section, okay? He even goes into telling a joke about religious things here. And points out we have no control, none at all. Now, I think we've probably moved a page for you guys. No, we're on 35 still. That's where the Christian, Muslim, and Jew joke is. Because we must be born with an intuition of mortality before we know the words for it, before we know there are words. For all the compasses of the world, there's only one direction, and time is its only measure. They're taking us for granted. Now, I'm skipping along and hitting the key high points here, but it's this that he's having this struggle with, why am I here? Guildenstern had it earlier. Now Rosencrantz is having it about the whole purpose of what's the purpose? Why are we here? Why is life even a thing? All right. Now, as he's having this meltdown, we have Claudius, Gertrude, Polonius, Ophelia. Another Hamlet scene is about to take place. And what the line will close on is Guildenstern saying, death followed by eternity, the worst of both worlds. It's a terrible thought. Now, we'll stop. I'll do a third video to finish this out. The thing with this that's kind of key is that it's really easy to be offended by his statement. What's wrong with eternity? I guess nothing if your vision of heaven is true. And first of all, if I asked you guys right now, what do you think heaven's like? We get a lot of vague answers because that's all we have to go on right now. And a lot of you are going to say stuff like, well, it'll be eternally praising God. All right, well, what's that going to look like? Because, if we're going to get to eternally sing all these amazing music that's right in line with what you like, praise and worship stuff, that might be fun. If you're going to be standing up there singing all 64 verses of that old hymn from your grandma's church, maybe that starts to take on a different image. And he has a question that's a valid question. It's like, no matter how much you like something and how wonderful something is, doesn't it at some point get old, is the point that Guildenstern's bringing up. Now, I don't think heaven's going to be that way. I don't think it's going to ever get old. I don't think it can. I think that the way we are on earth is very flawed, and God's going to, fix that when we get to heaven, and our mentality is going to change. But, if you're not a Christian who has strong faith and a belief in that, you can see where this struggle would come up, and Rosencrantz is having it. He's like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to die, and then I'm going to have this eternity of what? Now, he doesn't, there's not a direct attack on the concept of heaven here, so don't worry. But he's just wondering about what will happen next. Any kind of eternity, unless you just cease to exist. He's like, anything, what would it be like? Because you would never have there would be no end. And he says that scares him. And at that point, we see our train of people come back on. And we're going to switch to a different angle. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I honestly don't expect you guys to watch this. I know that these are crazy and they're all over the place, and I know that some of you are just completely baffled by all this nonsense. So if you're not watching, great. I want to film it for the sake of having it for the one or two who want it, or for me going forward, how to alter teaching a little bit. So thank you if you did stay through all 25 minutes of this. So let's stop here, and we'll pick up and close out Act 2. And again, I apologize for the meandering, wandering.